Thoughts on Islam? Well, as a Christian, I obviously think Islam is false. I think that the things that Muhammad says directly go against what we have very good reasons for thinking Jesus said. So I think Islam should be rejected based off that. The Kalam cosmological argument, it's not colon, it's Kalam, it's Kalam, and it comes from the Kalam school of thought in kind of Islamic theology. And so it's an argument for the existence of God from the beginning of the universe, or for the need to have a first cause. So typically, philosophers can kind of cash this out in different ways. As far as like how they articulate it, but generally it'll go something like this: premise one, the universe. Premise one, whatever begins to exist. Cause. Premise two, the universe began to exist. Three, therefore the universe had a. And then so in premise one, man, that same guy is just keep. Me to add him back in. So so premise one, whatever begins to exist has a cause. Premise two, the universe began to exist. Three, therefore the universe has a cause. Premise one, I don't think needs a whole lot of support, but if you wanted to offer support from that, you could argue for that in various ways. Usually the most controversial premise of the Kalam is premise two, which is that the universe began to exist. And usually philosophers have argued for that through philosophical means. So they've argued that the universe had to have begun to exist, because if the universe didn't begin to exist, that means the number of past events is infinite. And then we can kind of show how the idea of an infinite past is metaphysically absurd, or it kind of entails logical contradictions. And then so once one gets to the idea that the universe had to have a cause, you then do a kind of conceptual analysis of what that cause is, and you can kind of start to draw out properties. Well, if it caused all of matter to exist, it can't be material. If it's the first cause, then it has to be eternal. So okay, things like that. You can kind of draw off characteristics. And then at the end, what you get is an immaterial, eternal, personal cause of the universe. And that's a really nutshell argument. There have been a lot of contemporary philosophers who have used this. William Lane Craig is a really famous example of that. But other philosophers such as Alexander Proust, Robert Koons, and Andrew Locke have all also put forth a lot of really great literature about that. In fact, probably the best book on the Kalam are Andrew Locke's two books. One is God and Ultimate Origins, which was published a few years ago, and his other much more recent book, The Kalam and Teleological Argument. It's like a reassessment or something like that. It's the most comprehensive treatment of the argument that I've ever seen. So, all right, hey Grob, I don't know enough about. Someone asked, what do I think about Seventh-day Adventists and their theology? I actually don't know enough about them to feel comfortable commenting on them on a live. I don't want to disparage or put them up if I don't have the knowledge for that. Let's see. You realize, of course, that your God violates both premise 1 and 2. Okay, so let's talk about this. So I presented the Kalam cosmological argument, and I said premise 1 is whatever begins to exist has a cause. Now, someone in the chat suggested that my God would violate this, but no, it doesn't, right? Because you need to pay attention. I said whatever begins to exist has a cause. And I, nor pretty much any other Abrahamic faith, thinks that God began to exist. The entire idea here is not that everything that exists has to have a cause. I would reject that because I think that would lead to an infinite regress of causes, which, as I said before, is metaphysically absurd. So no, that wouldn't be an issue. So someone, Mike, can I go on? Someone said, Mike's evil twin said the universe can be eternal. I disagree. I think we have good reasons for thinking that the universe can't be eternal. And the reasons for that are, as I said, the impossibility of an infinite regress. And then also like I said, the science of that disagrees, as someone else mentioned in the chat. I think Kaysen wanted to come on. Let me see if I can invite, Kaysen 000, was that you who was wanting to come on? I'll send you an invite if that was you. I thought I saw you said something about that. I'm going to go ahead and invite him up. Let's see. Someone said Christianity is faith-based. Faith is believing without proof. That's actually wrong. So Christianity, I would say, is faith-based, but faith-based does not mean you believe something on the absence of evidence. And if that was the case, then obviously none of the apostles or early disciples had faith, because they all, I think, had good reasons for holding that. I would say faith is something more like trusting in a belief or an act of trust, something along those lines. So yeah, I would just reject this notion that faith is fundamentally at its core believing something without proof. I think I have faith in God, and I put my faith in Christ by believing in him, and I do that because I think I have good evidence for it. So scrolling through here, the chat, someone said, can I talk about evolution? I'm not going to get into that because me personally, I think whether or not we affirm some type of evolution doesn't affect whether or not Christianity is true. It doesn't affect my arguments for the existence of God or anything like that. And since my main focus of doing this is to bring people to the faith, whether or not they embrace evolution or not, to me is irrelevant. So I probably won't get into much of that here. No, I don't say my God is the exception. I say whatever begins to exist has a cause, and then I argue that the universe began to exist, and then I say that the cause of the universe, we have properties which would make it my God. Feeling towards the Pope, Vatican, I'm not personally Catholic. I don't have anything against my Catholic brothers and sisters. I don't know a whole lot about the current Pope. I don't follow up on current Pope politics and things like that, so I won't say anything positive or negative about the current administration at the Vatican. Let's see. Is Catholicism Christianity? Yes. Catholics are Christians, Orthodox are Christians, Protestants are Christians. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. They affirm the same core tenets of the faith that we do. What are your thoughts on different canons found between the churches? I think the different canons between the churches are very minute. They don't make much difference theologically, so whether or not you go with a Catholic, an Orthodox, or a Protestant canon, it's not going to affect your theology. I think that there's a decent case to be made for why the Catholics and Orthodox, the books that they have in their canon, maybe Protestants were wrong in rejecting those. And so I think there's a decent case to be made there. I'm not going to present it as being, oh, this is super strong, like everyone should accept these as canon. I will say that even the early church who didn't accept those books as canon still thought that they should be read by Christians and that they were useful for the faith. Time doesn't progress. Mike, what are you talking about? Of course it does. And it would entail an infinite regress. Sure it was. If the universe never began to exist, that would be an infinite regress. Let's see. What are my thoughts on Orthodox Christianity? I have no issues with it. I have family who are... oh, it's fine, Kason. I see that you said you can't right now. I have family who are Orthodox Christians. I think they are good Christian brothers and sisters. I may not agree with everything theologically, but I don't probably agree with anybody 100% theologically, and so I have nothing against them. Why presuppose God was the cause? I don't presuppose God was the cause. I do a conceptual analysis, and I draw out characteristics of the cause that it has to have based on the nature of the case, and then I recognize that those things that the cause has, these properties that the cause has, things like being eternal or immaterial or personal, this is what all men call God. Let's see. Lemonade says, also Garb, is Tertullian a church father or a theologian? People always say different things. I don't think Catholics or Orthodox canonize Tertullian as saying he's a church father. He's definitely an early church theologian. He's definitely an early Christian thinker. And I think he was definitely really influential to the beginnings of the faith. So whether or not that he's canonized, you'd have to ask a Catholic or an Orthodox, but I don't think they give him the title of church father from my understandings of the Orthodox that I've had with them. Let's see. What else do we have here? Someone said 98% of babies end up burning eternally because God is love. I don't think that's probably the case. You would have to force onto me a variety of different views to get that position, but I don't hold to that. Let's see. I'm trying to go through and see. Let's see. I'm going through trying to pick the good questions or things for conversation. Please feel free to put anything you'd like in the chat. Faith is not a strand in which evidence is absent. I disagree with that. So, for instance, I know that my dentist knows what he's doing, right? I go in and I see on the wall he has all these degrees, and I know legally he can't be having a practice unless he's gone through a certain type of training. So I have like evidence to think my dentist knows what he's doing. But that doesn't keep me from being scared when I go to the dentist. Sincerely, like I am like a small child when I go to the dentist. But I would say I put faith in my dentist when I get in that chair and I let him put his hands in my mouth. And I think this is a good kind of comparison to draw between Christianity. Faith is acting based on the evidence you have. It's putting trust into something based on the evidence that you have, even though you don't have certainty about it. And so if you're going to say, oh, faith is, the absence of reason, I'm going to say throughout the entire Christian history, that has not been what faith means. And so you're mischaracterizing the Christian faith, and so you're attacking a straw man. Let's see. God did not create man. Man created God in order to control the masses. Well, Tarhili, I would challenge you to support that assertion. Even if you don't think God exists, I would challenge you to present evidence for why we should think that that God was somehow created by like some guy in a cave was sitting around here and he's like, these kids are just too unruly. I need to create something to make them obey me better. Oh yeah, I'm gonna create, I'm gonna create this idea of a God. I would challenge you to support that assertion, and I would point out that when we look at the history of human thought, whether it be Christian or non-Christian, fundamentally, all the evidence we have shows that people come to believe in gods or spirits because of one of two reasons. One, they infer it rationally. So for instance, if you read Plato, right, which is pre-Christian, he thinks that God exists because of order and the natural world. It's a rational conclusion for them. Or if you read, obviously the Hebrew or Israelites, they think that not only do they see God as being rational as the creator of the universe, it's not just a rational inference from them. It's also that they believe they've had experience with God. So if you're going to say, this is wrong and it was just made up, by all means, I would challenge you to take on your burden of proof there. Someone says, what caused your God to exist? I think God is the first cause in the causal chain. I think we have good reasons for thinking the causal chain cannot be infinite in the past. I think there has to be a first cause, and I think that God is that first cause, and so because of that, he would be an uncaused cause, the unmoved mover, so to speak, if you've read Aristotle. Let's see. So someone said the universe didn't come from nothing, but God came from nothing. Again, this is a misrepresentation or a misunderstanding of the Kalam. I don't think God came into being. I don't think he began to exist. So it's not that he came from nothing in that sense. I also realize I'm blocking out my nice little background that I got here for people to see my YouTube. I need to go down a little bit. Someone said, thank you for doing these lives. Hope you have a lovely day. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Hope you have a good day too. Let's see, I'm going through looking. Someone said, are you Protestant? I don't particularly identify as being Protestant. I agree with my Protestant brothers and sisters on some things, but I also agree with my Catholic and Orthodox brothers and sisters on some things. And I recognize that in the house of God, there are some things which are not essential that we can disagree on. And I try not to let those things present an obstacle to having good Christian fellowship with my fellow Christians on any topic. Let's see. Thoughts on Mormonism? Well, as a Christian, I obviously think that there are aspects of Mormon doctrine that are wrong. So, for instance, if you look at the early teachings of Joseph Smith and the Church of Latter-day Saints, you see, amongst other things, they deny the eternality of God. They say God was once a man on another planet. They deny the eternality of Jesus. They say that Jesus is, was the brother of Satan and that he was birthed from Mary and things like that. And so I think Mormon doctrine is clearly and emphatically wrong on things like this. I also think it's important to note that it's probably almost certainly not the case that every Mormon who goes and sits in a Mormon church on a Sunday morning, they may not know all those things, and they may have beliefs about God and Jesus that are very similar to you and I. So while I would say Mormon doctrine is emphatically non-Christian, I would just make sure that everyone knows, if you're talking with a Mormon, make sure you actually ask them what they believe so you don't attack a straw man, because I've talked to Mormons who, if you ask them what they believe, it's very similar to what a Baptist would say if you ask them what they believed. Let's see, what else? Oh man, is the Bible perfect even though there were books taken out by Constantine? So this isn't a misrepresentation of history. Constantine didn't go through and remove books from the Bible. This is kind of just internet make-up history. It depends on what you mean by the Bible is perfect. There's a doctrine that's common in Christianity called inerrancy, which is the idea that there aren't any flaws or any errors in the Bible. I personally hold to that, but that's not a central aspect of my faith. And if it turned out that inerrancy was wrong, I would still be a Christian, because, like I said, that's just what a lot of people don't realize, especially Muslims, is that Christianity is explanatorily prior to the Bible. The Bible is not explanatorily prior to Christianity. So if you say, oh, look, in this section of Second Kings, it got a number wrong. Even if that was the case, that it got it wrong, I could be like, all right, cool. I guess author of Numbers fudged there on something. It wouldn't affect what I think is the historical reliability of the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. What are your thoughts on different Christian religions? I obviously think that they're wrong, but I also don't think that they're completely entirely wrong. I think a lot of the non-Christian religions are the result of people, as Paul says, kind of seeing dimly through a veil. They kind of get glimpses of the truth and they're reaching for it. And that's why I think our view towards non-Christian religions should be one of recognizing, hey, you're seeing something there and you're right. Like there's something there. You're grasping at something that's true, but here is the truth. It's like what Paul did in Acts 17 when he goes to Athens and he talks with the men and the women at the Acropolis. He says, the unknown God, I see you have this statue here to the unknown God, and I'm here to preach to you this unknown God. The unknown God is the creator of the heavens and earth. And you'll see a lot in these kind of pagan, I get what we would call pagan, maybe tribal, polytheistic religions. Even in a lot of them, there's this idea of like, yeah, we worship these, various gods, but like there's this high God, and we're kind of separated from him. And so, that's kind of my things there. Someone said you got spanked by Dan. I don't think so. I think that I presented my case with integrity and I provided sources so people who wanted to, do their own research on that could do so. And I think Dan did nothing other than just assert that he was right. And so I'll leave that up to the audience, obviously, to make their different conclusions there. But yeah, so someone says tarot cards. I think that that's wrong. I think that's a form of type of witchcraft, which is condemned amongst other places in the Bible, Deuteronomy. So some Lemonade and Time said, any good Christian theologians on YouTube I can watch, credible ones? Yes, here's my recommendation there. William Lane Craig is a philosopher and theologian. He has a PhD in philosophy and theology. He did his doctorate in philosophy. His dissertation was an argument for the existence of God, the Kalam, which I mentioned earlier. And then his PhD on theology, he did on the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And he did that arguing for the historicity of the resurrection. He also has a website, reasonablefaith.org, and I think he just put out free courses on equipping people to defend the faith. So I would check out his website, reasonablefaith.org, and I would also just check out some of his debates and some of his lectures on YouTube. Besides that, I love Craig Keener. Craig Keener is a fantastic just titan in the field of biblical scholarship. He has lots of free lectures online too, and those two guys should keep you going for a while. Someone said, what do I disagree with orthodoxy? I'm not sold on the idea of real presence in the Eucharist. I'm not sold on the idea of apostolic succession. Things like that. I mean, they're not big, huge things, but they're things that I'm not confident enough in to want to affirm. Someone says this guy is delusional. I don't think so, but thanks for your thoughts. Do you think Christians can be pro-choice? I do think Christians can be pro-choice. I'm not pro-choice. I'm pro-life. I think that's the proper position to have. But if someone is pro-choice, I don't think that we should demonize them and say, well, you're not a real Christian. I think that we should just engage in that as we would engage any other type of moral disagreement. And I don't think we should cause divisions in the church over that. And that's just my personal view on that. Let's see, I'm going through looking at, someone said this is kind of like pointless trivia, has all kinds of knowledge about fictional stories. Well, I don't think my knowledge is about fictional stories, nor do actually most scholars here. I'll take a page out of Dan's book here and say, the idea that something like the Gospels are merely fictional stories is something that is not attested to by the wider consensus of historical scholarship on this. They widely recognize that these are ancient Greco-Roman biographies and that Jesus was a real person, and that amongst other things, he died, that he was believed to be a miracle worker, that he was believed to be an exorcist. Things like this are widely recognized in the field. So let's see what else. How do you prove he's personal? So there's, I think, a variety of things that could be said there. He's talking about the Kalam. How do you show the first cause is personal? There's several ways you can do this, right? So this is how someone like William Lane Craig might argue. And I'll give two arguments that Craig produces. So we have this first cause of the universe, right? And we say, okay, it's immaterial and it's eternal. Okay, so what are some things that might fit that description, right? Something that's immaterial and eternal. Well, one thing that would fit that description would be an unembodied mind, if those type of things exist. An unembodied mind would be the type of thing that would be that could be eternal and immaterial. Another thing that might fit that description is an abstract object, and an abstract object is something like the number 7 or propositions or things like that. And so he kind of says, these are our options, right? If we see that the cause has to be eternal and it has to be immaterial and transcend space, things like that, then it can, these are kind of 2 of our criteria. And he says, listen, if you can have any other ideas you want to put forward there, go for it. But it seems like these are the 2 prime candidates. And he says, well, it can't be in abstract objects because abstract objects are by definition causally impotent. They can't cause anything. And then so through process of elimination, it would be an unembodied mind. So that's one argument one might give. I think a better argument, and one that I would often give, is to point out that, well, the cause is eternally present, right? When you kind of think like, okay, it's the first cause, it's the first in that causal chain, it's eternally present. The cause is eternally present, but the effect came about a finite amount of time ago. And we might think, well, okay, if the cause is eternal and the effect came about a finite amount of time ago, how can we hold to those 2 things? And so Craig gives the example. The cause of water freezing is being, below 0 degrees centigrade, right? So if I said the temperature has been below 0 degrees from eternity, it wouldn't make sense to say water began to freeze like 5 minutes ago, right? Like that wouldn't make sense. The cause is always present. And it seems like the only way you can have an eternally present cause and an effect that comes about a finite amount of time ago is if the cause is an agent that can freely choose to bring about a new effect. And so he gives the example of, imagine a man sitting in a chair from eternity past. That man, being an agent, can freely choose to stand up, in which case you would have a new effect arising from an internal cause. This is an idea that Andrew Loke also talks about and draws on in some of his literature. So, for instance, Loke makes the point that the first cause is something that it needs to be something that can bring about the causal chain. It can't be something outside of itself that gives it efficacy to bring about the causal chain. But also, it has to be the case that the cause can restrain itself from causing. The cause can kind of withhold itself from bringing about the effect. And the reason it has to be able to withhold itself from causing is because, as I said before, it's been eternally present, but the cause has been finite. So that's another line of argument. Finally, someone like Swinburne, and this is the last point I'll make here before I start reading other stuff in the chat, say, well, the water, hopefully, am I back? Are we good? Okay, I saw I lost connection there for a second. Sorry about that. This is what I get for being on satellite internet. So someone like Swinburne would say, well, the cause is either personal or it's like deterministic, something like that, but it can't be deterministic because it's the first cause. So again, that would be it's personal. Okay, so looking at other stuff. Someone said, what's your opinion on intercession from the saints? I want to speak with fear and trepidation here, and caution not to take my word for this, and to do your own research and pray. Me personally, I think there's nothing wrong with asking the saints to intercede on our behalf, and that's been my kind of position now for a while. And I'll say, before I got on my live today, I asked for the saints to pray for me. I asked for Paul and Saint Clement of Alexandria, who my name is named after. I asked for Saint Catherine. Man, I keep on getting... Okay, there we go. I'm sorry about the disconnections. Someone says, is there a hell? Yes, I think so. I think that's affirmed. Man, this chat choose to do something. I see that... I see that my chat keeps getting interrupted because it says I've lost connection. So I'm going to switch over to, I'm switching over to my phone data instead of Wi-Fi. Hopefully that should clear some things up. Somebody insinuated that if God can restrain from causing things and he's responsible for everyone's damnation, I would say that's wrong. I would say that God creates free agents, and those free agents freely choose to reject him, and that therefore it is their fault that they are damned. So let's see, what else? Oh, God. Someone said, come on, man. Someone says, come on, man. Islam is the truth. May the one true God show you all his signs. Well, I disagree that Islam is the truth. In fact, I think Islam is probably one of the most improbable religions on the planet right now. I think that it has severe historical and theological issues. And so, yeah, I would have issues with that. Someone said, what do you think about C.S. Lewis? I love C.S. Lewis to death. I think he's fantastic. I ask C.S. Lewis to pray for me before I come on these lives a lot of times. Yeah, he has had more influence on me as a theologian and as a Christian, just in my own personal walk than I think anyone else has. And so I'm all about him. Let's see. I'm going to try to go through. I've got a lot of new messages. Someone says Jesus isn't real. That's an insane position to take. There's pretty much no disagreement among historical scholars that the person of Jesus existed. That's something that even Bart Ehrman, who is an agnostic scholar, and he argues against Christianity, wrote a book arguing for the historicity of the person of Jesus. So if you think Jesus never existed, you are so off the wall and in such a fringe group that you would pretty much find no relevant scholar who would also be willing to affirm that. So let's see. Someone says, is Jesus God or God's son? So it's important here to understand the Christian view of the Trinity, which is that there's one God, and within that God there are three persons, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We think that the Son is Jesus Christ, and so Jesus is God in the sense that he is of that one essence, that one divine soul. He's a member of the Trinity, but also he has this relation to another member of the Trinity of that we call the Father. So in a sense, Jesus is God in the sense that he's divine. He's a member of the divine, divine soul, but he's also God's son in the sense that he has this type of relationship with the Father. That's not to say that Jesus is begotten or that Jesus was created or anything like that. He's eternally existed. Let's see. Someone say the religion is clearly Islam. I disagree. What's the difference between free will and God's will? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. I would say that free will is to say that, philosophers disagree on what we mean when we say something like free will. A general idea is that suppose I have some action like a water bottle, which you cannot see. So I can raise my hand up, right? One explication of free will is to say that's freely chosen if I could have not done that, right? Like I raised my hand, but I didn't have to. If you kind of re-roll the tape, nothing determined me to do that. So that's kind of an idea that dominated free will discussions for a while. That idea was challenged by something called Frankfurt cases in philosophy. I won't get into the details of that, but long story short, because of some challenge to that, now maybe think philosophers are maybe thinking that, well, maybe the proper way to cash out what we mean by free will is it's to say that the source of an action originates in the agent and not something outside the agent. So whichever one of those you want to take, I think is unproblematic for this point. So as far as God's will is just what he wants to happen, right? So it's God's will that everyone should come to know him, and it's God's will that everyone should come to have a free, loving relationship with him. I don't know what the conflict is supposed to be between free will and God's will there, but I hope that helped. How is three gods one God? Someone said, how is three gods one God? I don't think that three gods are one God. I think there's one God, and within that one God, there are three persons. If you think that for me to say that Jesus is a distinct person from the Father, if you think that entails that he is therefore a separate substance or a separate entity, I would just say I don't see any reason to think that, and would put the burden of proof on you. How are you judged on G? I don't know what that means. Someone said, how did you get so smart? I wouldn't say that I'm smart, as I'm sure a lot of people in the chat would agree. I just have questions and I try to get answers to those questions. Someone says, are you Catholic? No, I'm not Catholic, nor am I Protestant. Someone said, someone asked me, in Philosopher's Garb, is the verse about drinking poison in the Gospel of Mark fabricated? I will say this, it's pretty much any scholar, whether they be critical, conservative, evangelical, virtually all scholars recognize that what we call the long ending of Mark, it was not in the original, that shouldn't be there, that Mark should cut off at before those last 12 verses. That's kind of a longer discussion as far as like textual criticism there. Some of our manuscripts have it, some of them don't. But I would go with the incredibly mainstream scholarly position, which is that the long ending of Mark is not authentic. So let's see. Someone said, do you love God? Yes. I try to love God every day. Someone said I don't know about the red heathers in Israel. Someone said, did he just ask C.S. Lewis to pray for him? Yeah, I did. Please read Ezekiel 37:24-28. It states everything the Messiah will do. Well, yeah, so I think that if we look at the Torah, what we actually see is that Jesus fits the idea of the Messiah perfectly. So, for instance, let's see, pull up Genesis 37:24-28. Making the lampstand. So this is interesting. Are you thinking that this is... did you get this verse right? 37:24-28. This is about making, yeah, that's about making an altar. I don't know why you think that has to do with the Messiah. Let's see. Going through, yeah, I just read, oh, wait, maybe it was Ezekiel. Whoops, my bad. I was looking at Exodus. That's my fault. Sorry about whoever put that in the chat. Ezekiel 24. My servant David shall be king over them, and they shall all have one shepherd. They shall walk in my rules and be careful to obey my statutes. They shall dwell in the land that I gave to my servant Jacob, where your fathers lived. They and their children, children's children shall dwell there forever, and David, my servant, shall be their prince forever. This is what we believe about Jesus. I will make a covenant of peace with them. It shall be an everlasting covenant with them. I will set them in their land and multiply them, and will set my sanctuary in their midst forevermore. My dwelling place shall be with them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Then the nations will know that I am the Lord who sanctifies Israel, when my sanctuary is in their midst forever. I think Jesus fits that perfectly. So I would object to that. Someone said, look, you made me an atheist. Okay. Let's see what else we've got going on here. People that keep asking, am I Catholic? No, I'm not Catholic. Yeah. Trying to see. People says, is there a correct way to pray? What do you recommend? Well, Jesus said that when you pray like this. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and so on and so forth. I probably don't need to quote the whole thing. I mean, that's a good place to start, but I think that gives us a model, right? So when I pray, I start by praying and I express gratitude. I ask for God to change my inner person in a certain type of way. I ask for him to develop in me the fruits of the spirits. And then I ask for specific things in my life, wisdom, for maybe specific problems I'm trying to figure out. And then I move on and I conclude with asking God to pray for people in my life. That's just me personally, how I do it. Yeah. So let's see. Someone sent something. Thank you for that. Someone says, can you tell us why Islam is wrong? Sure. This is really in a nutshell why Islam is wrong. Jesus lived in the year like 30, he died in the year around 33 AD, I think died and rose again during that time, right? And we have by the end of that first century in which he lived and died, we have numerous documents that attest to what he taught and what he believed and what he wanted his followers to believe. And not only that, but we have the early church warning, and we have Jesus warning that there are going to be people who come after me, who are antichrist, they are wolves in sheep's clothing, they are false prophets, right? So we're warned in the New Testament, in the first century, there are going to be some who come about and they preach a gospel that's different than Jesus's, right? So now we go 600 years later, and we have this guy named Muhammad who comes about, and he says, all this other stuff that we have documents for from the first century, he says, all that's wrong. And then he denies that Jesus is the Son. He denies essentially the entire gospel. He's in no place to have any type of information about that. He's 600 years removed from the event, and it's directly contradicting what we know Jesus told to the disciples and what the early church taught. And so this is a bona fide example of, I think, as we're told, and I think it's 1 John, this is a bona fide example of an antichrist who comes and denies the Son and denies the Father. Someone says, am I Catholic? Nope. I might put am I Catholic? No, up here somewhere, since I keep on getting questions about that. Let's see. People say, why do you think Christianity is true? Have you ever questioned your faith? Yeah, so this is good. Let's talk about this. Why do I think Christianity is true? I'm going to give a nutshell overview here, right? So I think Christianity is true. I think Christianity is, in a sense, if we were to boil it down, it's kind of two propositions, right? One is the idea that there's a God, there's this creator of the heavens and the earth, right? There's a God, and that this God came to earth, and he walked among us, and he died and he was resurrected, and that this person is a person of Jesus. So if I have to say, okay, why should I think Christianity is true? I need to think, okay, are there reasons for why I should think God exists? Are there reasons for why I think that Jesus is God? And so these are kind of the two questions. So I think in regards to why do I think God exists, I think that when I look at the natural world, I think I have, apart from any type of divine revelation, apart from any type of holy book, right? Whether I can set aside the Bible, I can set aside the Quran, the Vedas, whatever holy book, and I can just reason. And I think I have good reasons for thinking God exists. And I've talked before about that there's a field of philosophy called natural theology that engages in this type of reasoning. So for instance, Blackwell's Companion to Natural Theology is a good place to start on that. So I think I have good reasons to think that God exists. And so then I might think, okay, so there's this guy named Jesus and he comes about and he claims to be God. Okay, what reasons do I have for thinking that Jesus is God and that he rose from the dead? Well, if we were to look at the life and death of Christ, right, there are some historical facts that are just so well attested that the mainstream of scholarship recognizes them. Among some of these extremely well attested facts is it's pretty much widely agreed upon that Jesus and his contemporaries viewed him as a miracle worker and an exorcist. He was viewed and had an idea about himself that he was God's eschatological agent, which is a big word to say that he's kind of this Masonic figure that was talked about in the Jewish scriptures. And along with that, when we look at the life and death of Christ, we can see that it is, again, we have so much evidence for it that it's widely recognized by most scholars, and I can get into the reasons, and I'll talk about them briefly. We know that Jesus died on the cross by crucifixion. This is an extremely well-attested historical fact. We know that he was buried by a member of the Jewish Sanhedrin named Joseph of Arimathea. We know that shortly after Jesus' death, that his tomb was found empty by a number of his women followers. We know that shortly after his tomb was found empty, that various people, both in individuals and in groups at different times and places, started to report seeing the resurrected Jesus. And then we also see that the disciples themselves came to have such a strong conviction that they had seen the resurrected Lord that they were willing to die for that belief. And then, of course, we have some other so generally that's, I would say, okay, the best explanation for that is that, Jesus was who he claimed to be and he rose from the dead. I think there's more facts that we kind of pile onto there. I would say that we still today, we have people being healed miraculously by Jesus. And I think we have bona fide cases of people being healed from terminal illnesses to which there is no cure. I would add that onto the pile of data. I think people's experiences with Christ adds onto the pile of data. But all that is just a really nutshell. I mean, I just gave like a 2-minute, like a really 2-minute summary of kind of some of the reasons there. To really flesh those out in full, you would need to pick up a book specifically on that topic. William Lane Craig has a book called The Sun Rises, in which he goes into those facts that I mentioned more explicitly. Andrew Loke has a book on this topic called like Investigating the Resurrection of Jesus, a New Multidisciplinary Approach. It's really good. But yeah, so that's the thing. I think I have good historical reasons to think Jesus rose from the dead. I think I have good philosophical reasons to think that God exists. And then it all just kind of meshes together from there. Let's see. Man, I was planning to stay on here for an hour, but I see I have 5 people wanting to be, someone said, why would you ask C.S. Lewis to pray for you if you don't know if he's in heaven? Well, I would just say FFFF994, do you ask people in your life to pray for you? Do you ask your mother or your preacher or your friends to pray for you? And if you do, why would you do that if you don't know that they're in heaven? Someone said, is God all powerful and all good? Yeah, I certainly think so. So I'm going to take now, I've done mostly Q&A at this point, and I see I have a lot of people in the chat. I don't know what order these came in at. I'm gonna pick one at random. I hope. So yeah, we can talk. I wanted this to mostly be Q&A, but so anyways, I'm gonna have you. Hey, what's up?
I was gonna ask you, what do you think of LGBT people?
Yeah, so I think that engaging in those type of activities is morally wrong. I don't think necessarily having those desires are morally wrong, but I do think that engaging in homosexual acts would be morally wrong. So that's kind of my thoughts there.
Yeah, but like I guess what I don't understand is why would God like make me this way if like because everyone's made in his image. So like why would he make me this way if he doesn't agree with it? Like that's what I don't get.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that one thing we might ask ourselves is for any desire or for any disposition that I have, am I rational in saying that this is a disposition or a desire that was directly caused by God? Just in general, like even outside of the LGBT community, like that topic, right? I don't think every disposition and every desire we have comes from God, because as I'm sure you'll probably agree, there's lots of people who have desires that are really even again, like not even talking about like
Yeah.
homosexuality. Like, there are top things that they desire that are really bad, right? Like, and I'm an example of this is for some reason, guys like Jeffrey Dahmer had this, desire to
Yeah.
eat people. And I'm not comparing that to like homosexuality. I'm not saying those are on the same level. I'm just using this as an example of we need to be careful not to point at a property we have and say, aha, God gave this, right? And I think me personally, and I'll kind of sum up this idea, and I want to hand the floor back to you. I don't want to monologue at you. I think that in general, all people, whether they be people in the LGBT community or those not, we all have desires which are wrong and they're not as God intended. And I'm no different in that. I think I have had in my life sexual desires that were wrong for me to have. If I was to pursue those would be wrong. And I don't think it would be right for me to say, well, I have these, therefore God gave them to me, therefore I can pursue them. So that's kind of a reasoning there. As I think if we're gonna cash out that idea, or if we're gonna investigate the morality of that act, it has to be more than that. Oh, they left. Okay. If they want to get back in, they can hop back in. I was gonna turn the floor over back to them. So someone said, but the gospel said that there will be a messenger after the time of Jesus. So this is great. Let's talk about this. This is a really common Muslim argument for why they think Muhammad is a messenger who's prophesied in the Bible. And usually they go to this section of scripture in John where Jesus is talking about, I'm going to go now, but I'm going to send another one who is essentially going to help you and comfort you. And they try to plug in, oh, this is Muhammad. But if you read that scripture in context, it can't be Muhammad. It's talking about the Holy Spirit because it's saying it's going to help you remember the things that I taught you. It's never going to leave you. It's going to be with you. It's just all these properties. If you read, I think it's John 14 through 16. I was trying to remember what section of John it was from. I've been jumping around John so much lately. Let me pull that up real quick. John 14. Yeah, Jesus promises the Holy Spirit. So let's look at John here and just kind of talk about this. Jesus says, starting in John 14:16, and I will ask the Father, and he will give you another helper to be with you forever. Well, let's stop right there. Is Muhammad with us forever? No, he's dead. And even the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it neither sees him nor knows him. You know him, for he dwells with you and will be in you. Did Muhammad dwell within the apostles? No, of course not. That doesn't make sense. He wasn't even born yet. I won't go through all of John 14:16, but I think we can see right off the bat here, we have like some serious issues if you try to identify John 14:16 with the Prophet Muhammad, which is usually what they try to do with that verse, which is ironic. Let's see. Is this valid? Everything has counterparts, material, immaterial, finite, infinite, creatures, creators. So I think I want to make sure I get the question. This is a philosophical question, right? So the idea is, if we can say A has the property, or if we can say some object has a property A, that entails that some other object has the property not A. So it's the idea that any property that's instantiated, there is another property that there's another object that instantiates the negation. Is that the general idea of the person who put forth that question? Let's see. So I don't know if the person who asked that question. What's up, Sig? What's up? Sig's in here. Hey man, you're welcome to you're welcome to hop up on mic with me if you want. He's truly in philosopher's garb. Man, I'm so happy to have you here. Sig puts out great content, y'all. Make sure you go check him out. There's so much stuff going in my chat. Let's see. I'm gonna get Sig up here. If there's anyone else who wants to come, you let me know. I'm sorry. I realized a bunch of people who, when I was doing Q&A earlier, I looked down and there were 5 requests, and I do want people to come up to be able to feel free in talking with us and stuff like that.
I appreciate you, man. You are the GOAT, okay? I'm working on some things privately. Don't worry, but you are in philosopher's garb, my guy. Listen.
I am.
Go
I
in,
am.
man. Love the content.
Thank you. I wouldn't make that claim, but I appreciate you. There's a lot of really, really great apologists, a lot of really great Christians who are on TikTok who are doing great content, and I don't think I'm any better than any of them. And I think you're putting out great content too. So
don't be so humble, man. Be arrogant like me, man. Own it, man.
well,
kidding, man.
I mean, even you're not saying you're the GOAT. So I mean, I guess even you're not that arrogant.
No, indubitably, I am the greatest Christian philosopher of all time on TikTok. Listen, I'm kidding.
Oh, okay.
I'm
I was
kidding.
gonna say of all time. I was like, really? You're better than Aquinas? I didn't expect you to say that. So if Aquinas had a TikTok, would you think that you'd be better than him?
Ooh,
Oh, someone said.
Aquinas going to be the one publishing content. He'd be the kind of guy to say, "You want me to talk? Follow my Patreon." That's the kind of guy I feel like Aquinas is. So
yeah.
But look, man, I do have to jet though. But yeah, man, I just wanted to congratulate you, man. First TikTok live I've seen 100 views, bro. You're popping already, man. Take care, my friend. Oh wait, hold on, Christopher Fraley, is that you?
Yeah, what's up, man?
Christopher, how you been? Oh my God, what's up, man?
Yeah, we have a lot to get to one day. We were talking about the 5 ways, right? That was you, wasn't it?
It was me. I do have to run though, so consider this me running away from you, because I'm scared.
Me.
I need to go genuinely and hang out with my family.
No worries, man.
I got some stuff to do. Take care, everyone. God bless you all, even if you don't believe in him. God bless you.
What's up? What's
up,
man?
Yeah, I wanted to talk martyrdom because I saw you mention it kind of when I jumped in here. And I often hear this claim from Christians that like the early witnesses of the resurrection were killed because of their belief in the resurrection.
No, I want to back up and make clear. They were willing to die. Not all of them died, right? We know not all of them died. Since John didn't die, right? He led a long, I wouldn't say happy life, but a long life in isolation on
That's fine. That's fine. Okay, so but I don't know of any of them like that we have in the historical record that died because of this belief. Who?
Yeah, I mean Peter, James, Paul are all described either in Acts or in, I think Josephus mentions the martyrdom of James.
Well, hold on.
Yeah.
Peter and Paul were executed by Nero, right? And Nero wasn't executing anybody because of the resurrection beliefs. He was executing people because he needed someone to pin the fire on. And
sorry, go ahead.
And he just picked a minority group to sort of point the blame to.
Well, I don't think that's an accurate representation. We know there was widespread persecution of the Christians under Nero, and to suggest that he was just, I'm going to pick this and it be them. I'm just going to randomly pick this minority and say it was them. Well, why did he pick them? Because I don't think he liked them to begin with, right? Like he was antagonistic with them. And so the question is, so for instance, with Paul and Peter in Acts, we have them being, we have historical records saying that they were being brought before officials. And they were saying, stop preaching this stuff, or else we're gonna. And then they beat them and say, stop preaching this stuff. And they say, no, we're not gonna stop preaching it. And so if we have them being brought before officials and they're saying, stop doing this, or we're gonna kill you, or we're gonna beat you, and things like that, it seems like it's a pretty straightforward case of they were willing to die for their beliefs.
Yeah, I believe Luke, the guy that wrote Luke, believes that, or at least was putting forth this idea that they were being martyred for that reason. But outside of that, it's not really attested to anywhere. Like the reason why Peter and Paul were executed was simply because Nero needed a group to blame the fire on, and he picked a minority group that wasn't well liked.
So I wanna. What's your reasoning for thinking that this was just Nero arbitrarily picking these guys because they were Christians, and that it wasn't hostility to the Christian faith as a whole?
Well, So just to be clear, I don't necessarily think he wasn't hostile toward them. Clearly, he didn't like them because he's willing to let them get executed. But I don't think it has anything to do with him saying, hey, I believe in the resurrection, and someone's like, the resurrection didn't happen. Recount, or we're going to unalive you. I don't think that ever happened.
So, but now that's a mistake to think that in order for someone to be counted as a martyr, or to say that someone was killed for a belief, or to say that they were willing to die for their belief, that it has to be the case that it was this type of situation where we say, "Don't say this, or we're going to kill you," and then the person says it anyways, and then they get killed. I don't think it has to be that explicit for it to be a case of martyrdom.
Okay, but you do agree we don't have any examples of that specific type of martyrdom I'm talking about, right?
No, I disagree. Okay. You're saying of the specific type of oops, sorry, I misclicked something. Of the specific type of that explicitly, I don't know of any off the top of my head, but that doesn't particularly bother me. I don't think it's needed.
And then James, if you look at like the Josephus account you're talking about, where James is executed, that appears to be from a vendetta from the high priest.
But why do the high priests have a vendetta against him? It's because they don't like what they're preaching.
No, it doesn't say anything about that. I can't remember the reason, but I think it's book 1820 where it talks about it. The reason that passage is important to me is because it mentions Jesus. But if you pull up the account, it doesn't say anything about them having an issue with what they're preaching or anything.
Let me see if I can find it.
I would just Google James passage Josephus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's see. Festus was now dead, and Albinus was but upon the road. So he assembled some of the Sanhedrin of judges and brought them the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ, whose name was James, and some others. And when he had formed an accusation against them as breakers of the law, he delivered them to be stoned. But as for those who seemed the most equitable of the citizens, and such as were the most uneasy at the breach of the laws, they disliked what was done. They also sent to the king Agrippa, desiring him to send to Ananias that he should act no more. Yeah, I think that's the relevant section. I won't keep reading all the names because I don't think that makes your point. Yeah, but I mean, I think if we have a high priest killing someone, I mean, like this is the account that we get of in the New Testament and in early history, is that the Christians were being persecuted for their beliefs. They were being put out of synagogues. We later know under both Nero and Diocletian that the Christians specifically were targeted and martyred in pretty brutal ways. And I think it's pretty clear this was done for their belief in Christ.
Where does it say anything about their belief there?
Well, why else is this high priest killing them? Like,
this is because he's accusing him of breaking the law.
Yeah, why is he accusing him of breaking the law? Is because they were preaching that Jesus was the Messiah, and they considered this to be blasphemy.
You can't just insert that in there, though. It doesn't say that.
But no, I don't have to. So why did they kill Jesus? Why was Jesus killed?
I think Jesus was killed because he was preaching the coming apocalypse and asking people to follow him.
Yeah. So, but in the earliest narratives of Jesus's persecution that we have, the accusation being levied against him is that he's committing blasphemy, right? Okay, is blasphemy something that is liable to be crucified under, right? Well, the fact that they're bringing him before these priests and are crucifying for it, that seems to be like a capital offense. And they're accusing him of blasphemy. And the reason they're saying he's blaspheming God is because he's claiming to be God. So if Christians are going around and they're saying Jesus is God, then it seems like they as well can be accused of being blasphemers and therefore put to death. It doesn't seem like I have to do any type of exegetical jumps here.
Well, yeah, I mean, aside from pointing to me the sources that claim this happened. The only one you really have is Acts, because Josephus doesn't claim that. Tacitus doesn't claim that.
But Josephus. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm gonna say none of these sources that talk about this martyrdom, or if you want to call it that, don't talk about specifically anything to do with their beliefs.
Well, again, there you would have to say that they are being that it has to explicitly mention their beliefs for us to say that it's being for them to be martyred on account of those beliefs. I don't think we have to specifically have it say, and these people were put to death for their belief that Jesus was God and for their belief in the resurrection. I don't think it has to spell that out for us to recognize that they're being persecuted for their beliefs.
There's more parsimonious explanations. For example, with Nero, the most likely explanation is that this group was an easy group to sort of a scapegoat, so to speak, to push off this fire on, and that's why they were persecuted. And then when it comes to the high priest, it mentions there that he's accusing him of breaking the law. There's nothing in either of those passages about them being persecuted or put to death because of what they believed.
Well, so in the section of Nero, did you quote a section of Nero? Well, what is your source there? What is your kind of first century source that Nero is just persecuting these people, that he's just arbitrarily killing these guys because they are Christians? And I want to point out, note that Nero's persecution wasn't just about the apostles. That was a large group, right? And we were talking about specifically persecution of the apostles.
Yeah, it was Christians.
Yeah.
The earliest mention I know of Nero is Tacitus.
Is Tacitus? 1 second.
Yeah.
So what does that quote say then?
It's short. It says that these Christians were like a unique lot that believed in many superstitions, and that they were blamed for the fire of Nero, who was, and then he says something about Nero being like an unlikable fellow in so many words. And I know I'm butchering that paraphrase, but I can't remember the exact wording.
Okay. Well, we may. How often are you on this time? On this time of day?
My job is kind of like work whenever, so it just kind of depends. If you want me to come back later with more specific like references, I can.
Yeah, and I was gonna say I can do the same thing. So if you want, because I was planning to be on here preferably an hour, no more than an hour and a half, because that's what I told my wife I would get off. I'm at an hour 10. But I do want to finish. I do want to keep having this conversation with you. I don't want you to feel like I'm just skirting you. But yeah, do you follow me?
I do now.
Okay, yeah. Feel free to hop in next time, and I'll try to prioritize getting you on, and we can, and I'll, because I don't have my specific references pulled up here, I'll have to go scrounge those up. But I think this is a good line of inquiry, and I definitely want to continue it with you. And I'm sorry that I feel like I have to cut it off.
That's fair, man. We all have stuff we've got going on in our life. I get it.
Yeah. What's your position?
I would classify. I think the best way to classify myself is an agnostic, and when I say agnostic, I literally mean like I'm probably like 60-40.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, cool. I appreciate you getting on and talking with me about those. These are good questions, and I definitely want to be able to revisit this with you again when I can have everything pulled up, and you can have everything pulled up, and we can go into it more in depth.
Yeah.
And I can have feel. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. I mean, I want to let you have the last word though. I try to make sure that anyone who gets up and does this, I want you to have 30 seconds to a minute to maybe like book in this conversation with your thoughts or things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So essentially, my position here when we're talking about martyrdom is that I do believe that early Christians had some sort of persecution going on, but I think it was mostly because of the fact that they were minorities and outliers. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there's any real examples that I can find of witnesses, people that would have witnessed the risen Christ, where they were persecuted specifically for their beliefs in that witness, or for seeing that. Mm-hmm. All the accounts we have of these early apostles being martyred or killed have to do with other reasons, being blamed for things they didn't do, or breaking laws or whatever. It's not. I don't see any example of them saying these people believed in this resurrection, so we're going to persecute them or anything like that.
Okay. Yeah, and something else I was thinking I might do is I might, when I get a chance to collect my sources and get the specific quotes, I could put a short video up that you will know in advance the stuff that I'm going to be referencing, and that might also give us a way to each be more prepared. So if I'm going to like cite such and such from such and such author, does that sound like a good idea?
Yeah, sure, man. Whatever you want to do.
Okay, cool. Well, hey, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. You're going to be the last guest for the day. I do need to get going. Thank you for everyone who came and hung out with us. I'm going to try to be doing these pretty regularly. I'm not going to say every day at 11, but I'm going to try to be regular about doing this about this time period. So, yeah, please feel free to hop back on. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I greatly appreciate it. God bless.